approximation. So that's why I put these dates here. And if you go into When We Rule Robin Walker, I'll bring that book next week so you can have a look at. He's got some dates that go further back than most black historians. But he makes reference to a lot of different historians. The development of the city of Kerma was a great area in Kushite history and has been recognised as a classic period. So the first period with Tarseti was the Golden Age. Now here with Kerma culture, we're looking at the classic period beginning in 1750 BCE. Kush became a very large and powerful state. The Kushites seized control of the Sai Kingdom, which was Egyptian colonial centre, and dominated the whole of Nubia from the Nile, from the first cataract. So they controlled, remember as well, because they had the cataracts protecting them, they controlled a lot of that area. Robin Walker references Professor Hansbury, who informs us that of an Egyptian inscription in the city of Waset. Waset is actually the ancient name for Thebes. Remember, whether it's the name Egypt or Thebes or the names that you hear now, those are the Greek names for Egypt. The original African names were changed. So Hut-Karpatar is the actual original name of Egypt. And they called Egypt by a different name. So Ethiopia, meaning, does anyone know what Ethiopia meant?
Blackface.
The land of black faces, yeah, or burnt faces. They had Bilad as Sudan from the Arabs, which means black something, black land. Kemet was black land. So it went by loads of different names, and Ethiopia was seen as the whole of Africa. When I was reading black history back in the day, and they kept on making reference to Ethiopia, I didn't know what they meant. But they meant Ethiopia as the whole of Africa back then. So, the great city of Kerma, 242 towns, cities, and districts in Kush. So you know that compared to European existence, there was a lot more developments going on there with those towns and cities that they had in Sudan. At this time, Kerma was the largest city in Africa that lay outside of Egyptian territory. So, the decline of the city of Kerma. The Kushites were controlling trade along the Nile, and the great ruler, Queen Hatshepsut, or when I was in Egypt, the tour guide called to remember the name Hot Chicken Soup. I think I've remembered it because of that. Expanded Egypt's trade links on the sly, undercover, because she coveted Kushite trade. So, the Queen's successor, Tutmosis III, sent an army up the Nile past the first two cataracts and defeated the people of Kerma in 1525 BC. This defeat, the drying up of the water supply from the Nile channels, and possibly for religious reasons, wanting to be nearer to Jebel Barkal. If you remember, Jebel Barkal is a holy place where they thought Amun-Ra resided, the great god. The Kerma kingdom moved to Napata, which became the second Kushite capital. So, King Alara there's nothing about him. So if you hear the name King Alara, you won't be able to find much in the history books about him. He's considered the foundational Kushite king who founded the Napatan dynasty. However, not much is known about him. His predecessor, however, is well known, and that is King Kashta. So, Kashta, meaning Kushite, was considered a formidable leader. He extended Kushite power into Egypt. In the 10th century, the Libyan princes. So when we go through it, you're going to see how much conflict the Kushites were in with different fractions, whether it's the Assyrians, the Libyans, the Axiomites, or the Egyptians. And gained control of Egypt, establishing the 22nd dynasty. So the Libyans rolled up on Egypt and conquered them, and then they run the 22nd dynasty. And although the Libyans worshipped Egyptian gods and intermarried, they continued to speak their own language and lived outside of Egyptian settlements, which for some Egyptians wasn't really good for them. Waset, Thebes, the religious centre, fell into neglect, and the people of Waset rebelled around 832 BCE in destroying Libyan monuments, some of the Egyptian ringleaders were burnt alive. But King Kashta had some issues with that neglect. So, King Kashta was mad about the decline of Egypt due to Libyan rule. Kashta owned gold mines that had previously enabled Egypt to flourish. Conflict continued, and they ended up in a stalemate, a mad stalemate. Nothing went on for another 1,000 years, so they were stuck in this stalemate of uncertainty and in destabilization. So they were still upset and fighting for a century about who was going to rule there. Kashta saw himself as the guardian of the Egyptians' best interests, and with his son Piankai and Shabakwo as his military leaders. And you've got to remember that dynasties were always family led. So in those days, there was a lot of incestual sort of relations. So his were his military leaders. He gained control of Basset and became the lord of two lands, so Egypt and the Kushite land, and the founder of the 25th dynasty of Egypt. So the Kushites at that point controlled Egypt. 3 years later, unfortunately, not like King Numa, who got killed by a hippopotamus, died, but he established a strong and crucial foothold for Kushites in Egypt. Kashta was laid resting El Kuruma. So, Kashta, the 25th dynasty, that's the main thing you should remember about.
So I'm just going to shut the blind because I can't really see the writing.
Okay. So, we'll go on to the sons. Piankai, son of Kashta, was known as a powerful, intelligent, and generous king. Piankai's father, King Kashta, had forged some good alliances with those Libyans after the defeat in the Libyans. According to Malana Karenga, Tefnakat, a Libyan leader, had ambitions of ruling all of Egypt. Piankai, according to Zainab Badawi, took 4 years to organise his troops. So he was putting in work, thinking about how they were going to go and roll up on them. He took 4 years to organise the troops, and Piankai defeats Hermopolis, Middle Egypt, and Memphis, Lower Egypt. And it's impressive. I mean, it's funny because I used to think that the Victory Stella and the Memphite theology were two different pieces of writing. They're actually the same piece of writing that people talk about. In his impressive piece of writing named The Victory Stela, Piankai documents his defeat of Egypt. Piankai returns to Kush after his conquest and dies around 716 BCE. And remember, I talked previously about the sort of narrative that had been put out there regarding black writing and African writing, that we'd only pass down history through oral tradition. So obviously that's not true, because he was writing then about what had happened in his conquests. So we've got Piankai going in on the Libyans, and then we have Shabaka, his younger brother, 1716 to 1702. Supposedly was a just ruler, really good ruler, and formed alliances with Libyan princes after Piankai's death. Shabaka set up trading links in Phoenicia, entering Egypt into a new level of prosperity under Kushite rule in Egypt. And remember, the Kushites had a lot of gold and traded a lot. Shabaka had relatively good relations with the Assyrian ruler Sargon. However, his son King Sennacherib, who he'll come up a few times, you'll see about him, he always wanted to go in on people, did not like the Kushite rule over certain areas in which he was influential. Sennacherib did not attack, sorry about the E, and he bided his time, as he was not yet in a position to start going to war with the Kushites and Egypt. Shabaka spent most of his life in Egypt, so he wasn't in Kush a lot of the time. He enjoyed Egyptian life. When he died in 702, his body was sent back to Kush for his burial at Jebel Barkal. And all the kings, most of the time, went back to Jebel Barkal to be buried. Why? Because Amun-Ra, the god, they said, thought resided in Jebel Barkal. So, Shabaka is famously known for copying and preserving the work of his ancestors. Sorry, that's the Memphite theology in Shabaka text. So those two, yeah, those are the two that I thought were different, but they're the same text. For years I taught my kids that it was two different texts. I got that wrong. Kashta and Piankai had brought them a renewed cultural and political strength to Egypt, while Shabaka had brought a new level of prosperity. So, Kushite lifestyles were great at that time. So they were ruling, they were conquering. No one could really mess with them at that point in time. So, Shabikwu and Toraku. Shabikwu, 702 to 690 BCE. Shabaka had previously established alliances with the king Hezekiah of Judah, who was worried. Is that in the Bible, Hezekiah? Who was worried that the Assyrians would put his kingdom under threat. Shabaka provided Hezekiah with protection. However, when Shabikwu was crowned as a new pharaoh in Memphis in 702 BC, here he comes again, this same old guy rolling up. Sennacherib, however, was asserting himself on a military level. He ransacked the city of Babylon and he pillaged Western Asia. Shabikwu sent his Cushite and Egyptian troops into Western Asia, and they battled the Assyrians. Shabikwu's men won, and Jerusalem stayed in the hands of King Hezekiah. Shabikwu died in 609 BCE, and Cushite kingdom passed on peacefully to Toraku. So, really held up the fort for Hezekiah, supported him against this guy that is always coming up, but you find out what happens to Sennacherib later on. So, Toraku, a lot of people talk about him being a great king. The Kushites had now established themselves in Asia, and Toraku positioned his palace closer to the Mediterranean Sea. So, if you think about the Kushite Empire, they were expanding and extending everywhere. Their trade was going as far as India and China, so we'll look at that later. Toraku enhanced, here it is, stronger trade links with Western Asia, and Kushite confidence grew. Assyria was in turmoil, and Sennacherib was murdered possibly by two of his sons in 1681. Esarhaddon emerged as a king. I'm sorry I haven't got the accents down packed. I wish I could say the old Kushite accents. Emerged as king, and he went back and forth with Toraku in a number of bloody battles. I think it was about 3. In 669 BCE, when Esarhaddon went to engage in battle, again he was struck down by illness and died, so he didn't even get to that last battle. And then Assurbanipal became the successor and finally defeated Toraku. Toraku died soon after. And why was he buried in Jebel Barkal?
Because of the god.
Because of the god, yeah? So, then things moved on. So we went from Kerma culture. So there was the golden age in Tarseti. Then there was Kerma culture. And this really is the sort of last real period until the 6th century when Kushite culture splits off into 3 or 4 different fractions. So, after Toraku's reign ended, Tamtamanai ruled from 664 BCE to 653 BCE. Aspelta then became his successor. Around 603 BCE, Hasamtik II of Egypt invaded Kush. Aspelta relocated further south to the ancient city of Meroe. So some people think it's because of that invasion. Did they move because of the invasion? Or was it something else? It has been suggested that the move to Meroe may have been a result of pursuit for greener pastures to better support Kushites' growing population. So it may not have been wholly because of the invasion. It may also have been because their growing population, they needed another space to go to. Meroe was a great city which had exquisite palaces, magnificent temples, an observatory, pools, excellent arts and crafts, a large industrial complexes, especially built around large iron industry. So, an observatory, so you know they were doing some stargazing. They had excellent arts and crafts, they had temples for prayers, exquisite palaces. Some of the architecture that has been found from ancient African civilizations are probably better than some of the architecture today. When you make a comparison with the technology that we've got here today and what they didn't have, and especially if you sort of explore the inside of some pyramids, and the funerary chapel at Chirac in Egypt, where they've got monolithic type, they look like coffins that are made out of either black granite or marble that look like they're not for humans, and they're tons, the weight is in tons, but they've been put underground. So you know that when it came to architecture especially, they had a different mind. I mean, when I was in Aswan and went on a cruise down the Nile, I ended up, it was either Valley of the Kings, but there was a black granite throne-like chair that had looked like it had been cut out by laser. It didn't look like it had been chiseled, and when you moved in the light, you moved, it was black, and then when you moved, when it shone on it, it went all silver. So there's something going on in ancient times that was pretty deep. Trade was continued as the previous Kushite kingdom, so trading has always been going on with the Kushites, from Tarseti, Napata, from Kerma culture onwards. There's always been trade. Vigorous extending to India and China, so they moved out a lot. So before it was like 1,000 miles to the Middle East, but now they expanded their trading routes. At this period, the role of the royal women became more significant as power became more decentralized. So it wasn't just about one person now, the power in kingship. You know, it sort of spread across everyone, but they still had women leading the way. So, it's funny because when you read Black history, you don't know which name to take. So, a Kushite queen would either be called Kandaka, Kandak, or Candice. Yeah, so you can choose which one you want to use. Some people will know what they mean. So, the royal women were known as either Kandaka, Kandak, or Candace. So, Amishaka Hero II, I hope I got that right, was a Meroitic queen of the 1st century. One of the most recognised Kushite queens was a soldier queen named, does anyone know her name? Do you know what was special about her? You know her? No. What did she lack? There was something she didn't have. She didn't have an eye. So she lost that in battle, supposedly fighting with her son. So this is a one-eyed warrior queen, Armaneras, yeah? That is us, like us, Armaneras. This is one-eyed warrior queen, lost her eye fighting alongside her son against the Romans after they conquered Egypt in 30 BCE. So when you look at Kushite history, she comes up quite a lot in regards to backing down the Romans. The response from Queen Amanirenas and her Kushite army was fierce, and they took down the Romans in Egypt. It is noted that after the battle, Amanirenas, and a lot of people talk about it, you might see it on social media, took a bronze statue of Emperor Augustus and then buried their head under the steps of the Moreau temple to humiliate the emperor. And some people say she buried it there so that the head could regularly get trampled on. So, the Romans conquered Napatan, so they went back on the conquering role, obviously in a Kushite era in 25 BCE. However, she rolled up again and drove the Romans back. They couldn't handle what she was coming with. So in 22 BCE, they had to sign a peace treaty with the Kushites. So, really, that was the end of her era. Amanirenas had won back the whole of Nubia, and control that lasted until the conquest of the Kushites in 325 CE by the Axiomites. Does anyone know who the Axiomites are? Where did they come from? We'll find out about them later. So Eritrea and Ethiopia, the Axiomites were located there, with great kings like Zoskel, Zazana, and Lalibela, who I really like talking about because he had a really mad history and decided to go out and build 11 churches by hand. And if you see how the churches look, they're pretty deep. but he used to have these dreams and this beef with his brother, and he went into the wilderness or the desert, came back, his brother wanted to kill him. So when you hear the story of Lalibela, it's quite an interesting story. Even after being conquered by the Axiomites, the Kushites produced another kingdom called the Bachan culture between 250 and 550 CE. So we see how Kushite existence from the Golden Age, say we date it back, as they say, with the archaeological digs of Keith C. Seal and finding an incense burner in the city of Quistau, dated 5900 BCE, all the way their existence as a culture and their dominance to some extent lasted to CE or AD 1400. So they've got a long timeline of existence and of ruling. By the 6th century, 3 Kushite kingdoms, including Makuria, Nobadia, and Alwa, emerged. So now the Kushite kingdoms were going into a decline, and different religions were starting to take over. So during the time, the Kushites became Christian and maintained their kingdom until the 1400s, when the Muslims conquered them. Kushite history is illustrious. When you do things late night, this is what happens. Kushite history is illustrious, spanning from 5900 BC to 1400 CE or AD. From the golden age of Tarseti to the grandiose Meroe with all the observatory, etc. The Kushites were ancient people that spawned the first kings on the earth. So maybe it might be debatable for some people, but the first kings that ever existed on this planet came from where, Kyra? Where did the first kings on this planet come from? Africa, of course. So why is there rich history missing from the pages of history textbooks? Why can't you find history of the Kushites in the textbooks? So let's think about that. What's the time? All right, we'll go straight into it. We don't need a break because I was late. So, quick questions before we go into a little discussion. After the golden age of Tarseti dissolved, what culture emerged in Upper Nubia? Well done, Marcella. Kerma culture. Excellent. So, what kind of accommodation did the Kushites live in at the time? Mud brick houses. Where did the Kushites relocate to after Kerma period? Napata. What came after Napata?
Egypt.
Meroe. Yeah. So it's Kerma, Napata, Meroe. Who was the first king of Napata? Started with a K. Kashta. And his son Payankai. Name some of the opponents that the Kushites went to war with. Who did they go to war with?
Not the Egyptians.
Yeah. Remember, they went to war with the Egyptians and then they established the 25th dynasty and took over. In the end, yeah, the Muslims conquered them in the end.
The Romans.
The Romans as well, the Assyrians and the Libyans. So they were having a lot of wars and they got on really well with the Greeks for a while. So, there's a few of them. After the Kushite left Napata, where did they relocate to? Well done. So, what do you call a queen of Kush?
Candice.
Yeah, one of them. Yeah, Kandaka, Kandake or Candice. Right. So, a little discussion time as we're running out of time. The Kushites were the first to enamel pottery. They built over 1,000 pyramids. There's about 250 left, of 232 some people say. Back down the Egyptians, the Libyans, the Assyrians and the Romans traded as far as the Middle East, India and China. They had one of the most proficient armies ever that could shoot you in the eye with an arrow. So why do you think this great civilization is not discussed like the Romans or Greeks, when they had a history that emerged even before they properly existed? Why do you think there's nothing much about them in the history books?
Maybe because of their brilliance.
Yeah? What is it to do with their brilliance, why they wouldn't put it in there, Marcella?
Well, it would point that if somebody is able to do something so, powerful and amazing, it shows that your inability.
Yes.
That is something what you're lacking and you cannot match. So what normally, you steal what the other has, and then you take it for your own, and you say, well, that I created that, and you take the ownership.
I love that. That's a great answer. I love that answer. Anyone else out there? Out of the thousands of people that are here?
I think, so I'll give an example. Like if you grow up in a rich household and there's no limits to your ability, you aim higher, don't you? But people that tend to come from more impoverished backgrounds, they're more likely to, claim benefits and think, oh, this is the only life that I can do because I can't afford things. I think if black people were to understand and know where they came from, our limits of ability and what we believe that we can achieve would be so much greater. There would be no ceiling.
Really, that's right.
So I feel that they don't teach that history because they don't want us to understand that we don't have that limit.
That's a great answer. I like that. That is a great answer. I've got a few bits in here, unless anyone else wants to say something. So, Eurocentric bias. The mechanism had to work on the premise that they were the originators, at the forefront of everything. Otherwise, they couldn't hold the position they've held for hundreds of years if there was knowledge that the orchestrators of everything great from the beginning of time were black people. So that bias fueled the superiority sort of ideology in everyone's head. Also, systemic erasure, they had to erase that, and the system operate in a different way that was based on the fact that we orchestrated everything. How could you have a system that made black people look like they created everything and people be in line in the way they are now and controlled? And it was overshadowed by Egypt. For one main reason, really, because of the Arab invasion of Egypt. I mean, it was quite strange when I was in Egypt and I was walking around, and they were going, especially around Luxor, because if you go down to Aswan, more so where Kushite Empire was, there's mainly dark-skinned people there. But when I was in Luxor, they used to see me, and they all look Arab, the sort of stereotypical look that you see in old-school films, and no black depiction of Egyptians back then. But they'd say, Nubian! I really liked it. But because of the Arab invasion and how Egypt was portrayed, it became something great. Because of their illustrious and great achievements, it was sort of put side by side, not with blackness, but these lighter skinned Egyptians that created a great kingdom and civilization. So, what impact do you think this information about Kushite history would have if it was available to all in conventional history books? If they had this, what impact would it have on people? I think Deborah sort of mentioned it in regards to the glass ceiling.
It would change the whole of their system, basically. Their system is based on what they've given to you and what they've taken away. So from when you get an idea, oh, my people did this, I come from this, then it changes your mindset, you as an individual. It changes the way that you see the place that you're now held in or captive or whatever you want to call it, and then it changes your future.
That is a great answer. I've got a few things here. Deconstructs the idea that white history is the standard. Because remember, like Black History Month. Black History Month's a special thing. Yeah? It's Black History Month. Even though I'm going to talk about Stormzy talk about Bob Marley, talk about Mary C. Cole, maybe Malcolm X or Martin Luther King, but it's a special thing. It's not encapsulated in the annals of whole human history. So we, especially in England, history that is taught in school is what? White. Who do they talk about? Henry VIII, the First World War, the Second World War. They talk about nothing else, but it seems like it's standard, when really part of the standard should encapsulate black history. It tears down stereotypes, so it seems like they want the stereotypes to continue. Remember, divide and rule or divide and conquer is a thing that the elitists work by for black and white people, especially when we go into slavery and we look at Bacon's rebellion and how black and white indentured slaves and black slaves wanted to get together and rise up. They didn't want none of that. And so the emergence in 1861 of the word white came about to create that level of separation between whites and blacks. Also provides an insight into the origins of human development. You know that those elitists don't want people to know what really happened. So, why is the knowledge of royal black queens beneficial? And who is it beneficial for?
I would say it's beneficial for the mind of a lot of black people, but I think it's very beneficial for women, because I think women are a great, how should I say to you, they're a great part of just humanity in general, but they've been classed and labelled as maybe like second-class citizens type of thing. So to see that, you know, if you go back in history and to find out that, you know, you ruled lands and you ruled people and you've done it justly and you've done it sometimes even better than some men.
Yes.
That does an immense amount of things for women and men.
Yes.
Black family.
That's right, Imran. Well, that's a great answer. I think because in history, who do you hear about? I don't know if Baudelaire and Joan of Arc were the same person, or I think they're different people. But that's who I used to hear about in school. Baudelaire, Joan of Arc, just these white ladies, a couple of them that might have led some sort of war. Didn't ever hear about any black queens. But I put a few things. Queens represent a legacy of black female empowerment, so it gives you some sense of self-esteem. You know that you were great from back in the day. Challenges the idea of female leadership was rare, because female leaders were at the forefront of a lot of these civilizations, whether it is Egyptian or whether it was Kushite. Who benefits from this information not being in the mainstream?
The system.
The system benefits, reinforces the existing power structures. So seeing people in a certain light, you know, enabling, having a system that's colonial, that's an oppressive system. How can you have, especially in capitalism, because capitalism, even though it's a free market and you can raise up, for a lot of people and minority groups in the system, you're oppressed in that system. Because the ceiling at the top end isn't made for people from minorities, especially blacks, in education. So we live in England, 4% of the population is black, 12% are in prison. Sorry, that the criminal justice system in education, 92.5% of the head teachers are white. So you see there's a large disparity. Where myself and Deborah worked, I was the only black person in SLT. Now I've left, there's only 5 white women, and the place is predominantly black. So there's a real disparity in how people are looked after and how they're treated. Limits the public's ability to engage with the truth, making individuals more vulnerable to toxic ideas of superiority and hatred. So like I said, like with Bacon's rebellion, that divide and rule. So they can keep people, not black or not from minority groups, thinking and feeding and fueling that idea of black inferiority. So why do some black people stay away from their own history? Why do some people not like engaging in it?
Fear of the unknown.
Fear of the unknown.
I was thinking, there's lack, like, you almost feel like there isn't any.
Some of them think it, some people I think as well, strangely enough, think that they've been so brainwashed that they think some of the content's not real. It couldn't have been black people that done that. They've been so immersed in white supremacist culture that hearing that black people done these things is a mind bender. They're like, what? No, no way. But there are some other reasons. Self-hate. Once I start getting into Frantz Fanon, Amos N. Wilson and W.E.B. Du Bois, Frantz Fanon with epidermis alienation and what comes with having this coloured skin. W.E.B. Du Bois and this double consciousness, living as white and black, and Amos N. Wilson talking about our schizoid existence, again, fluctuating or holding blackness and whiteness in the same body. I know that when I talk white. Yeah? When I go into certain spaces, I have to code switch. How do I get on? Especially when I was an SLT member, they were going there and say, what's going on today? Talk my normal talk. I have to code switch and assimilate. Some people, the self-hate of living in this environment and seeing white as the superior beings, hate themselves for being black and feel inferior. But we'll get into the psychology of that later on. Strong focus on as black people being victims. So you always hear that, especially when the starting point was slavery. If you go back to 1441 with the inception of the slave trade, all the way up to present day, black people a lot of the time aren't seen as the orchestrators of history. They're seen as the victims that have been subject to segregation, lynchings, etc. And it all becomes a bit too much. The link between historical brutality and modern day injustices can make people avoid looking back or thinking that nothing will change. And I think to a certain extent, like Deborah talked about the system's banking on that. That you give up. You give up on moving forward. And if you look now, like me and you were talking, Mr. Roberts, people aren't marching. They ain't going out there and standing for a cause like how they used to be. They're worn down. So, trauma survival strategy is some people cannot handle the emotional burden. Like when I bought that book, Delectable Negro, the book about how they used to eat black people back in the southern states, and they used to have recipes, even though they used to use our hair and different parts of us for different things. Hearing that type of information for black people was too much, let alone all the brutality that came with the slave trade. So, when you think about black history, what type of emotions does it stir up for you, if any?
See, you said about self-hate, but that's what rises in me.
Okay.
Like self-hate, that actually I feel like, not only here, but it has happened some time ago, where I was feeling like I hate my whiteness. I hate the fact that and I don't know so much as you do. Yeah, a lot of hate.
You know, it's quite strange, Marcella, you come up with things sometimes that I didn't really think about. Yeah, so I can only imagine in the realm of white existence, how many people, white people that are clued up about things, actually experience that feeling in regards to themselves because they may know more, feel more about this history. So give her a round of applause, I didn't think that. Because you know, because white people, especially more so nowadays on social media, have become demonized quite a lot as a consequence of their ancestors' past. And I do not take it out of my mind, especially knowing a little bit about black history, that people at the lower ends of the social strata, being white, you know, sometimes you can get white people that are treating you a lot better than your own black people. That there are white people at the lower ends that are having issues with their own self regarding their forefathers and foremothers' history, and maybe sometimes a link because they may have acquired wealth from the slave trade as well. Thank you, Marcella. Can you think of any information encapsulated within the text of Black history that has inspired you or angered you? Mary Turner's killing that pregnant woman when after she got upset because they'd hung her husband the day before, and when she got upset they decided to hang her, throw petrol on her burner, cut the baby out of her belly and then stab the baby to death. When I heard about that angered me, even though there's a lot of different situations and examples, but when I first heard about that was Jesse Washington. You'll find pictures of Jesse Washington being lynched and burning alive. Emmett Till's story for me was an injustice of the highest proportions. I don't know if you know about Emmett Till, Marcella. There was a young boy from Chicago, 14-year-old boy, that went down to Mississippi to visit his cousins. And they went into town, a town called Money, and he went into a shop. Supposedly, the story goes, no one knows what happened in the shop, whether he whistled at her or said something inappropriate. They said she ran out of the shop, chased him. Some people say it was for no apparent reason. They got in a car, because Mississippi, extremely racist, clan-based environment. They got in a car and drove home. They were worried. His cousin saying, look, what happened? He said, whatever happened. That night, the wife, her husband and 4 other men came to that family's house because black people had no power in the South. They came in the house and they said they wanted Emmett Till. So they took him, they begged the guys not to kill him. Then about 14 days later or so, they found him in a river with a big fan tied to him. They cut off his genitals, cut out his tongue, shot him in the head, done all kinds of mad things. They had a case. The mum was distraught, but to show people what had happened, there was an open coffin. If you see his face, you wouldn't even recognise him. It went to trial, and those people got off. But years and years later, they found out that they had killed him. So there are situations, there are examples that have really angered me. There's some that have got me inspired. Well, all the histories of the ancients inspire me. So is there anything that's got you upset?
I remember my time when I created the song of Invasion Day. I did an extensive amount of research on the Aboriginals of Australia, and you know that brought me to I nearly was brought to tears by some of the information that I found out. That really angered me. Stuff that I don't even really want to relay back to everybody, but I'll say that situation for me.
Yeah, and you know, when you talk about that, it makes me think of Tasmania. I know when they went to places like Australia with these convicts and that, and we spoke about it, they went to Tasmania as well. Unlike the Aztecs and everywhere, they always decimate the scene and kill everyone off nearly and leave a really low population, but they've done that in Tasmania. And they cut off the head of one lady's husband and made her walk around with the head around her neck. So they used to cut off the ears of black people and keep them in jars as souvenirs. So there's a lot of upsetting things. Has atrocities committed toward black people led to the development of racist feelings in black people? Can black people be racist?
Yeah.
Can black people be racist? A really loaded question with different answers.
I don't know. I think most people are prejudiced, but I think I don't know if people agree, but I think racism a lot stems from that systematic structures of where we live and capabilities of how to do things and people being held back and stuff. I don't know. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's a difficult question to answer.
Yeah.
I've had different ideas about it, even down to the word racism, that creates a divide straight away because there's no different races. So we know that it's a biological myth and a social construct. Racism doesn't exist generally. So you already got a feeling when it comes to racism. Who does this word say? When you talk racist or racism in itself, sort of falls in line with taxonomies that have been developed over the years, putting whites at the top and blacks at the bottom. But I used to believe that how we act as black people is a response to the adversities we face. So how can we be racist when all these things have happened? So we're responding to them. Bless you. But there are people out there that have never experienced anything as black people and jump on the bandwagon and start talking about white people in a certain way. They don't even know about the history. I don't know if that you would just call that prejudice. Yeah. So I'm sort of in the middle with it, but I do have a real firm belief that a lot of, that's a generalisation, but quite a few black people respond to what's happened to them over time and also the information. So it's just a response, but it's a difficult question. Anyone else want to say anything about it? Are black people racists? Or are they just prejudiced? Do they just prejudge white people?
What do you mean exactly? Can black people be racist?
Because some people say that, especially online, they're saying, yeah, black people have become racist now. They keep cussing white people online. But it's not us, it's our ancestors that done that. We've got nothing to do with slavery.
I have a number of families in my family. There was one time when this black boy, I invited him to my house. I said, come, we can play. And he said, no, you are white. And it really, it pained me. It pained me. That he was young, he was 5 or 6 years old. And I thought, for this age, for that age, for him to say, not because other reason like I'm not allowed, I don't know you, but because, and what hurt me a bit more, I speak to the mother.
Yeah.
I speak, we read, so when you say, there were different instances, like I told you once that I was on a bus and
that's right,
and spat on me. I did not even look at him.
Yeah.
I got beaten up in a club, but that was my friend's fault. That was where she took the sunglasses, and I said, yes, she found them there. She said, no, they mine. I got the beat up. And to be honest, like I wasn't even angry with those 7 women. I just felt embarrassed for myself and for my friend. And I could understand where they were coming from. Like, yes, me personally, I didn't deserve it, but I deserved some of it. If you like, I understood what they were angry about. And it was even my son, something we were talking about, and I kind of identified the person by the culture. Oh, you're racist. So it's so like, what is it? Because I was thinking sometimes there may be 10 white people, and you just look at it, and you in your mind, I feel kind of sympathetic. Like you like the person, you kind of connect, and there may be another. And I don't like them, regardless whether And then the same thing with black people. I can see I don't know this one. Do you know?
Yeah, it's just humans. It's just humans.
So I'm thinking like, we do connect on different levels, but sometimes, for some people, they go through this skin kind of. Check. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, so a loaded question, to say the least. We have gone over time. Thank you for your participation today.